please welcome Keith Urban.
Hi, everybody. That was quite the introduction, Scott.
I meant every word.
Thank you.
So we'll get to Ripcord here in a minute, but I want to create a little bit of context for everybody. Talk about your early career, your influences. Tell me about the first time you heard country music. How did you become familiar with country music?
My first recollection was hearing country songs in my dad's record collection.
Uh-huh.
So my dad grew up in the 50s. He was a drummer. And so in the mid to late 50s, of course, the rock and roll bug went global. And my dad was just a rockabilly rock and roll fan, right? Because early rock and roll was very rockabilly. Mm-hmm. And when the sort of 60s rolled around and rock sort of went off in a different direction, he became more interested in country music. And there was a group in the 60s called the Pozo Seco Singers. And there was a guy in that group called Donald Williams, who my dad loved that folk group. And then Donald went solo and became Don Williams. And my dad became a Don Williams fan. So country music kind of took off from there. And the first concert that my dad took us to see was Johnny Cash when I was about five years old.
Well, and that's an amazing fact right there. What recollections do you have of Johnny Cash at age 5 or 6?
It was really more the experience that I remember, because I was 5 and our mum and dad got us little country and western shirts, and we had little bolo ties and the whole thing. We'd look decked out, you know. And it was at a place called Festival Hall, which is in Brisbane. Mm-hmm. It's 5,000 seats. It's an old boxing hall, you know. And I have to do this because you don't know what boxing is. Right? It's a boxing hall. And so I'd never been to anything. I'd never seen anything like this. 5 years old, Johnny Cash audience. Crazy, drunk, rowdy, loud, boisterous, you know. And I remember walking into the hall and just the roar of the crowd, and the whole place was lit up. And then all the lights went down, everyone cheered, and this guy walks out on stage, and I remember this sort of spotlight coming across the top of my head all the way to the stage, because we were probably in the nosebleed seats right now. Yeah. And he started singing, and I just remember that the place was loud, and then he just went right down to, like, you could hear a pin drop. Yeah. And that's what I remember more than anything, was just the power of that man on stage.
As you got a little older, was there an artist or artists, you know, that you heard on the radio or you heard at a friend's house or wherever that at some point you said, "That's it. I need to do that"?
I don't recall that specifically. That's why I think music for me has felt so natural. It's a little bit like saying, I always think of it as like, when did you decide you would walk? And you go, well, I didn't. I just kind of started doing it. And when did you make a decision that you were going to walk for the rest of your life? You go, I didn't. I just kind of was. That's how music has been in my life. Exactly like that.
When did you take up a guitar? When
6. Uh-huh. My dad gave me a little ukulele. My mum and dad gave me a little ukulele when I was 4. And he said I could strum it in time with the songs on the radio. So they asked somebody, what's a good age for a kid to start learning chords? And they said probably around 6 or so. And strangely enough, as the universe would have it, at the age of about 6, my mom and dad owned a corner store, and this lady called Sue McCarthy came by one day, and she said, I want to give guitar lessons. Can I put an ad in the window? How much to put the ad in the window? And they said, just teach our kid for free and we'll put your ad in the window. So that's how that started.
Perfect. Yeah. Do you remember the early songs you were learning? The early songs on guitar?
Oh, Mama's Little Baby Loves Shortening Bread.
Yeah.
How do kids stay with guitar when that's the repertoire, you know? But she was great because she just taught me chords, because I'm like, I wanted to learn House of the Rising Sun. I wanted to learn proper songs, you know?
Well, did you have guitar heroes? I mean, as you were growing up?
I didn't have guitar heroes like that growing up. I think, and I realize now it's had a big influence on the way I make records too, because I don't always think you have to have this guitar hero solo. It's also within the context of a song, how a guitar lays texturally and atmospherically and so on. Because I didn't, you know, I was hearing songs on the record player, on the radio. I wasn't thinking who was playing what. I just sort of went, well, that's a guitar, those are drums. You know, that I wasn't reading all the credits and stuff just yet.
Yeah. You know, I was fascinated to read about, and this is not something we're familiar with here in the U.S. The amateur country music clubs in Australia. Tell us about those, because that struck me as very unusual.
Yeah, God bless the fact they exist, because they're everywhere over in Australia, still even now. Just sort of groups of people, just like you have a car club or some sort of club, you know, just a appreciation society, really. And in Brisbane, where I was raised, there was several clubs. Northern Suburbs Country Music Club was one of them. And we lived on the north side of the town, so my parents joined up the Northern Suburbs Country Music Club. I think I was 7 and my brother was 9. And they used to get together once every 2 weeks, I think, at this sort of local hall, community hall. They would throw a band together, and anybody that wanted to get up and sing, you put their name on a list, and then you would get up and hopefully the band knew your song, and they would just, you know, whatever song. Yeah. And people would bring like a covered dish, and it was sort of very communal, you know? So, yeah. And everybody got hammered ass drunk, you know? So, standard thing, basically.
So these were your earliest musical performances?
It's early-ish, yeah. I mean, when I was 6, my guitar teacher Sue McCarthy had other students. So technically, the first time we performed was as a group at a nursing home, captive audience, and it's hard to get them up. But so. That's really the first time I performed in front of people. Yeah.
So kind of advancing the timeline a little bit. As a teenager, I read that you wanted to rock, and set aside country music.
Most teenagers do.
Yeah, of course. Why not? I did. Everybody did. And you were in a band called Fractured Mirror.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about Fractured Mirror.
Yeah.
First of all, the name is just beyond great.
I didn't think of the name. Evidently, it's the last song on Ace Frehley's solo record during the Kiss period.
Okay, good to know.
I didn't know anything about it, but the band was already in motion, and the lead singer decided, who was playing guitar, he's like, I don't want to be a guitar player, I want to be the lead singer. And so they heard about me, and they asked me to join. I was 15, and I joined this band, 15, 16, somewhere around there. Because I thought, well, that's it. I've played country music since I was 6, but I need to do something different. This is it. This is rock band. It's going to be me. The lead singer had a big Marshall Stack amp. So he was like, you can use that. I'm like, fantastic.
Done.
So I plug into that. And I got the leather jacket, and I got the jeans, and I'm like just rocking out. And I'm playing like Scorpion, Saxon, Judas Priest, like just full on, right? But at the same time, and this is around 84, 85, I think it was. So I was probably a little bit, 16, 17. And I just discovered Ricky Skaggs. Highways and Heartaches was out, and Waiting for the Sun to Shine. And I became obsessed with Albert Lee and Ray Flack and these guys and Chicken Pickin', and the whole thing was just like, man, this is awesome. Yeah. So I'm into these records. I'm playing in this band, Fractured Mirror. And one night we're playing and we're doing like a full-on song, I don't know who it was, Whitesnake, Judas Priest or something, and I got to do a solo, and through the Marshall Stack I'm like, this chicken picking solo. The band looked at me like, what the hell was that, you know? And it sounded awesome to me because it's like really loud, super distorted, but chicken picking, and it was like happening. Yeah. And they fired me. So my days of heavy metal playing came to abrupt end. Done. Yeah. But what happened that night is I found myself thinking, what do I do? Yeah. You know, it's what's my thing, whatever. Mm-hmm. And then 1987, 88 rolled round, and John Mellencamp had just put out Lonesome Jubilee. Yeah. I'd been playing 5 nights a week in a club all the time, top 40, big country, West Coast rock, a lot of West Coast rock as well, because I loved country, but I loved a bit of this and sort of all that, so West Coast rock was cool for that. And I didn't know quite what I was supposed to do, and I went and saw John Mellencamp that night. And it was the most epiphany concert experience of my whole life, because I walked in, and there they were, carrying off on drums, and it's like the most rock rhythm section with like drums, bass, and electric guitars. But then there's also acoustic, and there's fiddle, and there's accordion, and there's these rootsy rural lyrics, but sung with such a cool way.
Yeah.
The fact that I got chills thinking about it now.
Yeah.
It was just like, this.
I found it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm so great. It changed my life. And I got to talk to John 20 years later. I got to meet him and tell him.
What did you tell him?
I told him how much that concert changed my life. And he said, what did you take away from the concert? I said, I took away from the concert, just put together all the things you want to do. And he's like, man, that's the most awesome thing. Because most people go, I want to do that. Right. And I said, no, I didn't want to go and do that. But what I took from it was this inspiration to put all the things together that you love and do your own thing, find your own sound. Because John definitely got his own sound.
Yeah, and it's great that all these years later, and we'll talk about this in a couple of minutes, you've done that with Ripcord.
It's a work in progress.
Yeah. But before we get there, so 89, you come to Nashville. First time.
Yeah.
I think you said you were in the process of moving to Nashville basically from about 89 to 92.
That's right. I kept leaving more and more stuff here. That's what I did.
But so you I think there was a sense in your head that you knew you had to come to America for to kind of make your mark. And Nashville seemed to be the place, but why was it Nashville? Why did you want to go there?
Well, the one thing I did remember from all of my dad's records was everything said recorded in Nashville, Tennessee, So I went, okay. And I think at 7 or 8 years of age, I said to my dad, I'm going to go to Nashville, make records. He's like, great, fantastic. But I never had a plan or a timeline or anything ever. I just felt like that's going to happen someday, somehow.
And it wasn't exactly a seamless fit. I mean, when you got there, Nashville has, and this has been talked about for time in memoriam, a very kind of defined way of making music.
Yeah.
Songwriters, and they get together and there are songwriting sessions, and it's scheduled, and that did not necessarily meet up with your thoughts about songwriting.
No,
at the time,
or the way I felt about creating. I think.
Yeah.
It was my first trip. Was I came up with my manager at the time, and when we took my little demo tape with me. It was an awful little demo tape. I thought it was fantastic at the time, but it was just shocking. But we sort of got to know someone who knew someone who got us in to meet someone, and we sort of like playing this tape for everybody, and it was just like, you could just tell it was like, what the hell are you guys doing here? And I looked out of place. I was out of place. But one of the ladies by the name of Mary Martin, who was A&R at RCA, came upon this tape long after I'd left, and she heard it, and she sent me this letter, and she said, I listened to your demo. I mean, I was excited to get a letter from America. When I got back to Australia, I'm like, oh my God, it was like, it
cool.
really happened.
Yeah.
And she said, she was the only person who replied to me, and she said, I listened to your music, and it's quite good. She said, but the problem is radio's in a very traditional period right now. This is 1989. And Clint Black was dominating radio. The class of 89 is the signing of Garth Brooks, Alan Jackson, Brooks and Dunn. So I was completely out of place. And she said, your music's out of step right now with country music, but I hope you can come here and find a place and sort of hone your craft. And that was all I needed. That was the bit of inspiration, and support that I felt I needed.
Yeah. But it's interesting that even though it was acknowledged that your music at the time was somewhat out of step with country music, other people may have tried to figure out, okay, how do I fit into what's going on in the moment? But you stayed very much kind of true to your sense of what music meant to you and songwriting meant to you. How did you kind of stay on that path?
I think I tried things. I tried to sort of bend and flex what I did to suit. It was weird. I discovered that I think there is a difference between compromise and adaptation. And for me, I didn't want to compromise anything, but adapting to me meant looking at all the things I did and finding which component of that made sense right now and just working on that one. And don't try and make all these things work right now. This one seems to work, and that's me as well.
Yeah.
So let's focus on that one and adapt. You know?
And your debut record came out in
99.
99.
Yeah.
And that was produced by Matt Rawlings.
Yeah.
Had a big hit or a good hit on that record.
Yes.
Did these people know better than I do.
Well, I'd done a record before that with the group I was in called The Ranch.
Yeah, yes.
Which we did we
right.
started recording it. Oh,
right.
And we sold 3 copies out here, so thank you.
Right.
Glad you're all here
all the
tonight.
purchasers are here tonight.
Right.
Yeah. Very good.
And that record just was interminable to make because it was a classic example of being signed because we were different and unique. And then having us work in the studio and everything we came up with, they sort of said, well, we can't get that on the radio. And so then we would change it and become more like radio palatable. And then they'd say, this doesn't sound like you guys. It sounds like everything else. You know? And it was just backwards and forward. Yeah. And that went on for 2 years, recording over and over again with every producer in every studio, and sometimes recording the same song 12 times in different studios. It was mind-numbing.
Yeah, I mean, at some point, do you say, enough with enough with chasing what other people think I should be doing?
Yes.
And it's time to just do what I feel.
Yeah, that was a good... I look at that now as that really helped me because 2 years into that, I sat with my band and I said, okay, here's what I think we should do. We've now got 45 versions of all these different songs. Let's pick the versions we like and let's make our own album. We're going to sequence it and we're going to present it to the label and say, here's what we think is us. This is our record. Yeah. Ta-da, And we did that and they went, nope, go and do it all again. And we're like, ah. And right at that time, Capitol Records, Scott Hendricks, who'd just taken over Capitol Records, heard that same group of songs and he loved it. And he said, you know what, I'll just sign those guys. But at that time, I'd been thrown around so much as a solo act. I said, you know what? Let's be a band. And get rid of my name. We're going to be a band, man. And they're like, we're going to sign the band. And everyone said, well, keep it your name plus the band. And I said, nope, forget my name. We're a band. You got to sign all 3 of us. And it's an interesting thing when you have nothing to lose, you don't care. I didn't care. So I was like calling all the shots on everything because I could care less. Right. And they signed all 3 of us, and we went with a band name. We dropped my name. And people said to me, they're like, oh, wouldn't you probably won't want to do that. And I'm like, whatever, So signed the 3 of us, became a band, put the record out, and it never happened. Yeah.
But eventually, you did get signed again as a solo artist.
Yes, I stayed on the label and went to make a solo record. Yeah. Well, what happened was I was making demos at home, which sounded so much more like what would get on the radio, and it wasn't intentional. It was just from being there and absorbing everything. I felt like I think I sort of can make music that would work, and it suits me. It sounds like me. It's not a band. It's me. The hard part was finding the right session players that it didn't sound like, because the early recordings for me sounded like karaoke. It sounded like me singing on top of a track. And I couldn't figure out how to get in the track as the singer. It was really hard to do. And Matt Rawlings was the first guy who, because he was a musician, I really clicked with him. And I said, why don't we go and do a few songs? And he went, okay. So we went away and we did 5 songs. He put the band together and we chose the songs and we did it, just the 2 of us. And we took it back to the label, and they're like, "This sounds really good. Go do some more." And we did a whole album.
And I'm wondering if this was, perhaps your first experience of what would ultimately become many experiences with producers who understood you, kind of had a sense of what you were trying to get to, and helped you get there.
Yeah, absolutely. There's something about working with musicians in that setting, and there's some producers who are very good golf players, and there's some who are excellent musicians. And I wanted to work with the musicians because I don't really play golf.
Yeah. That may be the quote of the century right there. I like that. So in Nashville, there is a community. There is a community of songwriters. There's a community of record people, of producers, and it took you a while to find your way in that community, but it seems with the debut and working with Matt, you kind of, became embraced. Is that how you felt?
I think because I'd been there already, going up near a decade, I'd gotten to know all the writing community, and I loved songwriting, and would sit in any writers' nights and so forth. And then our band got to play around town a lot in every sort of club, so people would start coming out seeing our band play. So between sort of the actual playing that we would do from years of playing in the clubs and the songwriting, I think I started to feel part of the community, and they were very, very good to me. Nashville's very good to me.
I'm wondering if in that process, were there individuals that you would call at this point mentors? People who gave you advice. I'm sure plenty of people gave you advice, but advice that stuck with you, that carried through even to today.
There's a lot of things I think I picked up from various people along the way. I remember saying to somebody, the most important thing is getting a record deal. And this guy, I don't remember who it was, he said, no, the most important thing is getting the right record deal. And he goes, you don't want to be in the wrong record deal. And I said, well, what's that? What's the difference? He goes, you've got to make sure it's got to be the way you want it to be. It's on, not from a control freak standpoint, but just from being able to maintain your vision. And be in the place where you've got the right support as well for what you do. I think, too, there was an artist early on who acquiesced to his label with the thinking, I'll do whatever they tell me to do, and as soon as I've got a hit, I'll then take the reins back. And I watched it completely backfire. Because whatever works, nobody wants to change it. So if it worked on their terms, they were going to keep it on their terms. So I sort of thought, well, I should probably do it on my terms from the beginning, because if it fails on my terms. But if it also works, it works on my terms. Hopefully they'll let me do that again. Yeah. So that was a learning experience for me too.
Sure. So Golden Road was your introduction to Dan Huff.
Yeah.
I think a few people here know that record.
I feel like I'm inside the actor's studio right now. So. And Beverly Hills Cop 3.
Hold on.
Oh, fantastic.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am not James Lipton, okay? I'm just saying. And you've had a long and very successful relationship with Dan Huff. No question about it. And yet I've read some stuff that you guys would butt heads.
I always like to tell this story because in the end it speaks volumes of Dan.
Yeah.
I didn't want to work with him at the beginning because he was a guitar player, but people were suggesting I work with him because he's a guitar player, and I thought, I don't want to work with someone who's going to sort of force their guitar style upon me because I've got my own, and I thought we would clash with that. But so we met and we hit it off, and I remember this clearly. I already had a lot of songs for Golden Road, including Somebody Like You and a bunch of other songs that became singles. And I'd booked a studio, and I was using all the band I'd used from the Matt Rawlings record, and I had a really great engineer called Justin Niebank, who I'd met through Matt Rawlings. So brought in everybody, booked a studio, and I was going to do a ton of songs myself. And I said to Dan Huff, I've got a song for us. It's called Somebody Like You. Let's do that song. And he said, great. I want to work at this studio. And I said, I've already got the studio. And he went, okay, well, I'd like to use this drummer. I said, I've already got the drummer. I got the whole band, actually, the whole band. And he's like, okay, well, I use this engineer. And I said, already got an engineer. I got my own guy. I said, all you got to do is show up. Don't bring anyone or anything, because I want to see what you do. And none of this would have happened if I'd not gone through the thing with the ranch and being thrown around and tossed around and stuff. Because I just went, what does a producer do? What do they really do? And I wanted to see what he did. So I just said, just show up. And I remember thinking on the day, what could he possibly do that's going to elevate this whole thing? Because these players are great and the engineers are great and everything. Yeah. And he came in and we were playing the song, and he went out to the studio and he had Chris McHugh change up a few things with his snare and adjust the groove a bit. And then he changed this and he got his guitar out and he started playing with the band. And the level of musicianship just went like this, just with him being in the room, because he's such a great musician. Every musician had so much respect for him that I watched this whole session move from... I'd been in there 4 days with that band, and we'd cut a few songs, But when he came in, the thing just went up to this whole new level, and I went, whoa, this is a proper producer, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
He probably sucks at golf, by the way. Rightly so.
Yeah. But there are things over time, because you worked with him for a succession of terrific
lot of albums. Thank you.
#1 records and all kinds of stuff, where a producer can do many things, and you've talked about it: shape sounds, shape songs. They can be the psychologist. They can be the curator of ideas. Mm-hmm. How much of that did he do for you over time?
A lot, because I'm more, and I think when we came together, I'm maybe generalizing what we both do, but I would say that at that time, Dan was a very clean, slick, tight, cohesive kind of producer, and I was just real loose, like disheveled kind of approach to like capture the vibe, great, move on, done, it's real, it's raw, let's go. And he had more of the sort of record-making attitude. And so this thing happened with us because of those two different ways of coming at record-making. And over the course of those records, I think they merged. He loosened up, and I got a little more disciplined, I know when we did Somebody Like You, he had me play the solo over and over and over again. And it's the same solo.
Right.
And I remember at one point, I've got footage of it, the studio is hot. I took off my T-shirt and I'm like sweating and I'm playing the thing over and over again and I'm like yelling it down. It's the same solo, And he's like, do it again, do it again, do it again. And what happened with that is I then started playing something else because I was so fed up with it. And the simple little outro signature, that came from just sheer frustration. And instead of it being in the solo, we put it to the end of the song, and none of that stuff would have happened without that just constant drilling and waiting for something else to happen. Yeah. So I learned a lot from that. I learned that we should have air conditioning in the studio. So.
There is that. There is that. But this is an interesting and perfect segue into talking a little bit about the record before Ripcord, Fuse. And this is where the question to you is consciously starting to kind of break out a little bit in terms of let's go explore some other sounds, other producers, what they would bring to you. Is that what you were thinking, with Fuse particularly, that it's time to kind of survey, take a look around and see who else I could work with?
I wanted to see where what I do could go. And the best way for that to happen is to bring other people in and find that. But I think it can only. I felt very sure about what I did and comfortable about what I did. But I was curious of what else could I do? How else could I sing or play, or how could I approach songwriting and record making? What other things can I bring in? Yeah. And the best way to do it was to bring in people who were making records I really loved, like Jeff Bhasker and like Greg Wells and many of those producers, Nile Rodgers, of course.
Right. So there was one quote, and I think you said this around the time of Fuse. I just wanted to see how far I could go before it's not me.
Right.
That's sort of head turning. That an artist as established as you are would want to push the envelope that far to see where you could go creatively. That seems to me to be quite a risk.
Well, I felt like I do feel like I know when it's gone too far, and it's different, but I've lost the sort of the thing that makes it. That sounds like me. I think there's a thing that any of us. It's like if you went clothes shopping and you tried something on. It's a terrible analogy, but I'm just trying to say.
Thank you for that.
You, and you can wear a myriad of things. Some just won't look right, and you may love it. But it just won't work on you.
I'm hearing the snickering now. We can stop that. That's fine.
But you got to try. And then it's a good analogy in the sense that some things may feel really uncomfortable on you until you get comfortable in it, and then the way you wear it actually starts to make it work. So I wanted to keep pushing myself to places where I wasn't quite comfortable so that I could become comfortable. And by doing that, the edge keeps moving out, you know?
Right, right. So let's transition, talk a little bit about Ripcord. A remarkable record on many, many different levels. And I want to start by talking about the title. How did you come to the title of Ripcord? How did that come
It's a
about?
play that's opening in New York, and Nick told me about the play. She said, you know, there's this play called Ripcord, and I'm like, it's a great name, Ripcord. There's certain words that you just don't hear every day. It's not an uncommon word, but you just don't hear it that often.
Yeah.
And I thought that's one of those words. I loved the energy in the word.
Yeah.
It just had the right energy. And I thought the songs I was starting to put together for this record, which I had no title for at all, well, I had some working titles, but none of them really fit. And when I heard that title, I went, that's it. That's the name of the album.
Yeah, there was also something about, this is the thing you pull to save your life.
Yeah, the more I thought, I liked the sound of it at first.
Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's the metaphoric appeal of that word is the thing that you reach for to save your life. And I thought, for me, music has been that ripcord that I reach for to save my life many times.
Yeah, and I love that. So there are a number of amazing collaborations and producers that you work with on this particular record.
Right.
So first track on the record, Gone Tomorrow, Here Today, produced in part by Jeff Bhasker.
Yes, Jeff and Tyler Johnson.
Right.
I wanted to work with Jeff really badly. I loved what he did with Bruno, and especially on the Fun records.
By the way, the producer of Uptown Funk, the Grammy Record of the Year.
Well, along with Mark Ronson, but
Yes.
I mean, a really important part of those records. And but I think the first time I was hip to him was the Fun record, and the sound of those records. There was sort of a rhythmic, raw, primal coolness about them that I really wanted to reach out. I realized my dad was a drummer his whole life, so the people I was reaching out to was strong. It was very rhythmic, based. I mean, Jeff is classically trained piano player. Nile Rodgers, of course, the funk master. And it was all these rhythm cats I wanted to reach out to.
Yeah. So this is somewhat of an aside. In the process of making this record, you were in Los Angeles, and you spent a week rehearsing and playing with Rick Rubin.
Yeah.
Which I find fascinating on many levels. But I'm wondering for you, what did that week do for you in terms of the process of making this record?
It was exhilarating. I mean, I had sort of ideas in my head of how Ganjo could fit with other funk things and rhythmic things, and how a melody that might come to me would work on top of unexpected things. So like a very different kind of melody across this thing. And so I went out. I'd never really met Rick properly, but I love him so much. And then he's like, yeah, come on out, let's take a moment. So I played him a whole bunch of stuff on my laptop of just other artists, and I would sort of sing on top of it or play the banjo on top of it. And he got really, I could see he could see there's something in here, and he said, let me put a band together and we'll spend a few days out at Shangri-La and just see what happens. So he put this phenomenal group of players together. Bass, drums, guitar, keyboards, and then put me in the mix as well. And basically we just, he said, put together a whole bunch of grooves that you love. So there's like EDM stuff there, there's sort of trance stuff, there's like pop, there's just a bit like everything, a big mix of things, and a lot of obscure artists that I'd Shazammed and I didn't know about, but tagged the song, put it together on the playlist. And I ended up with like 30 pieces of music, and we got the band together, and I would just play something off that, and when we got down to something that we liked, he'd be like, yeah, that feels good, play along with that. So we'd play it, and the band would play along with it, and I sort of used the analogy of like a glider. It was like, this thing was like the airplane, and we were like the glider, and so this thing would take us up, and once we were airborne and flying, then we would disconnect that thing, and we would shut it off, and then we'd just be flying, we'd just be gliding as a band. So we weren't using this thing anymore. It was just a way to get airborne. And I'd be riffing at the mic or playing banjo or whatever we're doing. And basically we were just building ideas, and I'm yelling out chords as we're going, and the band's sort of following, and it was fantastic. And we spent like 4 days doing that. So I've got an armload of songs, well, things that will be turned into songs, but I just kept finding myself not able to flesh them out fully into song form. So I hope that down the track, very, very soon, I think those songs probably should be a whole album unto themselves. I think Rick, I'd like to do that with Rick, and I talked to him about that. I said, I don't think it should be just piecemealed into this album. I think this is a whole piece that should stand alone. So the goal is we're going to flesh these out, and it'll be a whole album.
Yeah. In the process, though, did it kind of expand your thinking about the things that you were working on for Ripcord?
Just working with Rick was incredibly liberating, and I think that's what I was looking for, was just artistic liberation.
Sure. So let's talk about another song on the record, "Break on Me." Folks already know this song. Shocking. So this is a deceptive, to my ear, a deceptively simple song.
Yeah.
You know, there's something very, very simple about this. And I'm wondering if, in hearing that, when you first heard this song, whether the idea of singing it is what attracted you to it. What I'm trying to get at is, what is it exactly that attracts you to two songs? Is it the vocal? Is it a melody? Is it a rhythmic thing? You know, how do you
It's everything.
Yeah, I mean, what is it that pulls you in, that says, I can make this mine?
For me, it's just something that speaks in something inside me, recognizes it, who recognizes it and goes, yeah, that works with us.
Yeah.
You know, and it's not always right, though. There's some songs I really love that I try hard to wrap myself around, and I just never quite get around it. You know, it's just.
When you go and finally lay that down in the studio, do you know in that moment that, oh yeah, this is it, I got it, we're good?
There's some songs I think are written in such a way that they feel, for me, they have a classic structure to them. That was one of those songs that just hit me as feeling classic in its melodic structure, everything.
Sure.
Yeah.
So we have to take one second here, because this thing. When I walked in here a couple hours ago and I looked at this, I said, I think I saw that in the cockpit of an airplane a couple of days ago. You have to explain what the heck this is.
Fun with iPads is what it is. It's,
is that what these are? We got iPads going here?
This is something I made, and it's just using for... It's using 4 iPads that are broken up into buttons which speak to the computer, and what it allows me to do is actually take the sounds from his record and exactly as they are without changing them or putting my own spin on them, and I can reproduce any sound on the record of any length at any time. So I could put, anything. I could put banjos. I could put just whatever. So
sure.
We're all out of work, by the way. Thank you, Nate.
The beginning of the end of country music right here. But it was my goal to compliment just what he does, and sure. He's such a brave artist. The way he records, no one else would let me do this. So this is, and I felt like I wanted to bring some of that to the stage in the live show.
Well, that's actually a very cool point. That there are, I'm sure, plenty of artists who would look at this and go, oh no, not in my world. That's not happening.
What's been really good about this record is it feels very much like it's been on its own sort of energy flow. Every part of it has been it's been going in a direction, and I've just sort of gone with it.
Right.
And even so much as Nate coming into my life is last year when I was working on the record and I started to work with various people, Jeff and various other people, and there was a lot of computerization and roboticism and drum machines and machinery happening, which I've always been fascinated with the integration of the two. And it's really come from writing with drum machines and playing banjo. Yeah. There's always been this dance between the machine and the instrument and the organic. And I've always loved those two things and how they can work together. I mean, Achtung Baby was such a sort of seminal moment for me as a musician, watching how that record came together and seeing that could work really well and fascinatingly. That Achtung Baby really was I kept referencing that when I was making Fuse. I would go back to it and listen to how they did things and how they did that and how this sort of goes together. And so I've stayed fascinated by that integration. And I said to my band, I said, we need another guy in the band for this next tour. I can feel it coming. And they said, well, what does he play? And I said, I can't define it yet. He's not a keyboard player. He's not a DJ. He's not a percussionist. He does all of those things, but somehow I don't want to see turntables.
He's
a
magician.
Want to see a keyboard. I need something else, and so I could see it.
Yeah.
And my bass player Jerry's like, man, you should get Nate. I mean, that might be his thing. And after we met, I think it was shortly thereafter, you came up with this contraption and created it. So it's crazy.
Does it have a name? Just
the Phantom.
The Phantom. Coming to retail stores near you very soon. Very soon. That is a ridiculously awesome thing. But let's move on. So there are some collaborations on this record, and there is a notable one called "The Fighter."
Yes.
And there is a yes. I love the way everyone here knows these songs better than I do.
Better than I do.
Yeah. And there is a notable vocalist who is on this.
Yeah, Carrie Underwood is singing on this song with me. And
so, why Carrie?
why not?
Wise guys. I mean, what did you hear in this song that you put together with her voice?
I was working on a song with Busby, who's an incredible songwriter, and actually he came in and helped us finish out a song that I was doing with Nile Rodgers called "Sun Don't Let Me Down." We'll get to in a second. But I really loved working with Busby, and I said, I was in London, and I said, can you come over and we can keep working? I got to keep working. So he flew to London. We found a studio, and I was in an Uber going to the studio in the morning, and I had this idea that I wanted to write a duet song, not the traditional singing together, but I wanted... This really came from a very simple thing that sort of happened early on in my relationship with Nick, was just this need for reassurance that this is a good, safe place for me, you know, and am I gonna be there, you know, when I need to be there?
Yeah.
And it's a very simple idea, and sort of in my head I thought, well, it's probably as simple as, you know, the girl saying, what if I fall? And the guy's like, well, I won't let you fall. And what if I cry? He says, I'll never make you cry. And you know, and if I get scared, and my experience has been, when that happens, you just hold her tighter. And when the world's trying to get to her, I'll be the fighter. And so I just went, okay, let's just go with this. And it was incredibly simple. But I got to the studio and said to Busby, I got this idea for a melody, and here's the chords. And he just fleshed out a track quite quickly. And he sang the girl's part, you know.
But I understand, as you were kind of putting this song together, you were thinking about Meatloaf.
Well, I remember the song "Paradise" by Dashboard Light.
Yeah.
And I always loved that.
By the way, great song.
It's a great song.
Let's not,
It's crazy.
Yeah.
And but I always loved the guy and girl talking to each other in that song. I just thought that was really unusual. And the same with "Baby It's Cold Outside." You know, the idea of just the conversation.
Sure.
And this is obviously super short, but nonetheless, it was, you know, born of a true thing happening in our relationship early on. And so Busby and I said, well, obviously Busby can't be the girl, and
Clearly not.
Clearly not. We got to find somebody. And so we both said, you know, Carrie would be great. And I even went so far as to start going through a lot of her songs, listening to where her vocal sits, where the timbre in her voice fits right, and all that stuff. And I'm like, she is perfect for this. So sent her the song, and thankfully she loved it.
Well, and this is where the miracles of sort of the modern technology in recording, because she ultimately put her vocal down. She was in a studio somewhere in the Midwest.
Yeah.
And you were making a video someplace else.
I was. we did have a deadline by now
Yeah.
for the record. Because we're about to come with the
Conveniently.
third single. It's like we can't keep putting out singles. Got to put a record out. So the record was basically done except for Carrie singing on the Fighter. Everything else was done, and the record was ready to be mastered. Just needed her to sing. She was on tour, and she said, "I got one day off, which is before your record's finished.
Yeah.
It needs to be finished, and it's in St. Louis, Missouri. I've got one day off. I can go into a studio on my one day off. God bless you, Carrie. That's the work ethic." And so I said, "Well, I'm shooting a video that day for Wasted Time, like on the other side of the country. I can't get out of it. You know, I can't send somebody to fill in for me." But I said to Busby, "Can you fly to St. Louis and find a studio?" And he did, and
not sing.
and not sing. That's right. And he's a great producer. So he just got in there with Carrie, and I took a break from filming the video, and I would FaceTime them. I'm like, this is so 2016 right now, you know. I'm FaceTiming
fantastic.
them in the studio,
It's
and they're
fantastic.
playing me the track.
Yeah.
and-
So you get this groove going. You get this thing going, and then you have this idea to get Pitbull on this track. Another collaboration that I don't think you would necessarily come to if you were just thinking about who you might be working with. Why Pitbull?
And again, I think it was. I didn't think it was. That came out wrong. Everything was very instinctual and reactionary, and we'd finished that song. It was done. We were all happy with it. The track was finished. There was a little breakdown piece in the song about three-quarter way through, where the keyboards are simmering, and it's this cool little muted moment that sort of built up and went back into the last chorus, and it was cool. Everybody was done, happy with that. And I had on Pitbull's Globalization station on XM one day, and every time I heard his voice, I'm like, man, I've always loved his sound, the sound of his voice and his rhythm, that Cuban blood. That rhythm is so good. And I immediately went, man, he should do something on Sunday Let Me Down. It was like immediate. And I called Nile, I said, do you know Pitbull? He's like, a little bit, So I said, can you send him Sunday Let Me Down? I think he would kill that song. So everything was just very like why not? Let's try that. So it wasn't, and someone asked me a while back, they said, oh, so you wanted to rap on that song? And I said, no, I wanted Pitbull on that song. And there's a real distinction between those two things, because if Pitbull heard the track and went, it's not really my thing, I'm not feeling it, we would have just left it alone. It wasn't about having a rapper, it was specifically him. So I'm so glad he loved it.
Sure. So, there was a great quote, and I've said it here before many times. Neil Young said in the studio, he talked about being in the studio, if you're thinking, you're stinking. And it strikes me, and I mean this in the most positive way possible, it strikes me that a lot of the way you came to this record is throw that thought process, that overthinking it out, and let's do what feels right.
Yeah, because it's playing music. It's not thinking music, it's just playing music. And I just want, I think when you get with people like Nile Rodgers and you get with people like Dan Huff and Greg Wells and Nathan Chapman, all these great producers, they're great musicians. And you just get in the studio and start playing. And for me, if it feels like it could go somewhere even more, like go there. Just keep going. Yeah. Keep trying something else.
Yeah. As you listen back to the record now, you happy with it?
I'm very happy with it, because it was. I wasn't trying to make a different record. I really hate that phrase, because I always think making a different record is easy to do. You could go and make a screamo record tomorrow. That would be very different, right?
That would be dangerous for me.
But it wouldn't be you.
Yeah, no.
So difference, not the goal. I think just sort of finding a way to take what I do to a new place was the